There are now two newish mods for Slay the Spire based on Project Moon's Library of Ruina that, when put together, can totally overhaul the game, changing everything from monsters, cards, relic, bosses, and more. First is Ruina by Darkglade and Squeenie that can replace every single act with new ones, featuring new monsters, backgrounds, events, music even, and bosses from the original game. And then there is Library of Ruina by Call of Fleet, the same creator of Lobotomy. This mod adds a new class, or actually kind of adds several classes and a bunch of new cool relics that give you a choice of 3 different effects. The actual game, Library of Ruina, is a sequel to that cult classic Lobotomy Corporation that has a really good mod that I made a video about that you can see here. If you actually want to go all out crazy mode on this game, you could combine these 2 mods with Lobotomy, but things might get really hard to keep track of. So let's look at the Act mod first. This requires the Act Like It API that will give you an option of where you want to go each act climbed. These acts replace literally everything. The only thing that you would really recognize at this point is the shopkeeper. It's actually really cool. If you begin in Act 1 Isaiah, you'll be greeted by Angela now instead of Meow, who will give you similar starting options and a few new ones regarding new ego cards that are just a special pool of very powerful and very expensive cards. Just like the vanilla game, your first 3 hallway fights are from the basic pool, very simple fights to get you started. One of these are the Forsaken Murderer, who will gain a little bit of strength and then barrage you with multi-hits, but any attack against this guy will cause him to lose 1 strength for the turn. Normal hallway fights in Act 1 are pretty simple. Some of them have noticeable counterparts to vanilla in Act 1, like the crazed employees having similar scaling to the cultists, but a lot of the other ones are completely unique challenges. Friends to the Galaxy are a cool but simple Act 1 fight. These guys have a little bit of health regeneration and they will revive themselves with the HP of their partner at the end of their turn, so you do have to make sure that you are splitting your damage amongst both of them equally. The elites in this mod are all really tough, scary, and unique, which is the way I like them. I want to look at 2 of the Act 1 elites as an example because you're going to be seeing the Act 1 elites a lot more often than the others, so it seems like it's worth talking about them. The pair of all-around helpers will alternate between a heavy multi-attack and then gaining temporary strength next turn. Their pattern recognition passive removes all of their debuffs if they deal 10 or more unblocked damage in 1 turn, which turns that temporary strength into permanent strength. Every single turn against these guys is a choice between blocking so they don't scale out of control, or trying to kill them before they can kill you. Another Act 1 elite is Alrayun, who confused me a bit at first, but now that I understand it, it's a pretty cool fight. Her Winter's Inception passive says that the first attack against her each turn gains Laurel Wreath, and that Alrayun takes 50% less damage from attacks without Laurel Wreath. So basically, the first card you play against her per turn will deal normal damage for the rest of the fight, while every other attack will deal 50% less. This creates an interesting scenario where you start off pretty weak, but then you start scaling stronger and stronger each turn. It also makes you value non-attack damaging things like orbs or poisons that aren't weakened by her passive. When I say the Act 1 fights are simple, I'm not meaning that as a bad thing, I actually mean that as a great thing. I think that games should start off with the simple stuff first and then add the complex stuff later to not overwhelm our brains, and you'll soon see just how cool and complex that the later fights get in Act 2 and 3. The events in these new acts are really cool. Some of them give you a really interesting decision with really impactful rewards and some harsh downsides. A simple Act 1 event is Snow White's Apple, that gives you a choice between gaining a ton of max HP but becoming cursed with Parasite, or losing a little bit of max HP to get the Malice Relic that acts similar to a Mercurial Hourglass, but it becomes stronger when at below half health. And of course, all of these acts have different bosses that you can encounter at the very end. When it comes to Act 1, I'll let you discover that yourself. All 3 of the Act 1 bosses are pretty easy to understand. I don't think you're gonna need my help, and they're really cool, so I don't want to spoil them for you. Before we get into the rest of content that Ruina Act mod has to offer, let's switch over and take a look at the other mod showcased in this video. Library of Ruina at its core is a class mod that adds a new playable character, but becomes so much more than that as it lets you customize this character to the point where it feels like many different classes in one. And it also adds a ton of awesome relics for every class in the game to enjoy. Even in the character selection menu, there's quite a few differences that you might notice compared to the normal classes. First of all, you can pick your character out of all the playable ones in the actual Library of Ruina game. This is mostly a cosmetic choice, but one other character, Bina the Librarian of Philosophy, has a different starting. The other important thing to note in this selection screen is the option to activate random ban. This mod adds over 300 cards, which is way more than most, so this character usually gives you 9 card choices at the end of every combat, for a better chance at getting the synergies that you're looking for. If you ask me, 9 choices every combat is way too much. I'll be sitting there for like hours every single combat, so activating the random ban will remove several pools of cards chosen at random to lessen the total reward pool and then let you get down to a choice of 4 cards at the end of battles rather than 9. There is now a card pool button on the top right next to the map that lets you now see what is available in your current run, allowing you to plan out your strategy. This class's starter relic is Librarian's Page that doesn't actually do anything at first, but plays a huge part in the customization and why I say this kind of feels like a bunch of classes in one. After each combat, you'll be rewarded with a random key page that you can choose to equip, replacing your current page and your current outfit. You can right click your page at any time when outside of combat to look at all of you collected and then change. Some of these pages do extremely simple things like changing your maximum HP, increasing the damage of certain card types, applying debuffs, etc. But some of these get really crazy. For example, Valentin's page gives you 223 maximum HP and an extra energy per turn. If you're above 25% max HP, you'll lose 25% per turn. It also gives you 1 strength and 1 dexterity per 4 cards exhausted, and then also increases the damage of cards with 1 attack times 2. That is a lot of effects for just 1 relic. Expect a lot more crazy and complex effects like this in the rare key pages that you'll be able to find. Each one of these pages is tied to a card pool that can be removed from activating random ban, once again narrowing things down to help you get the synergies that you are looking for. And that is the base mechanics of this class. Not even getting into the cards yet. I'll go into that next, but right now I want to go back to the Ruina Act mod. With the Act 2 and Act 3 fights, things start getting pretty crazy. There are a lot of mechanics that aren't anywhere close to anything that you'd find in vanilla or even any other mods out there at the moment. One of the cooler and unique things about the fights are the fights with allies. The Hermit of the Azure Forest is an elite in Act 2, where you have an ally, the Servant of Wrath, who will attack first enemy each turn, and if the enemy plans on hitting your ally, you'll see their face above their intent. You can transfer your block to your ally by pressing this button, which transfers 5 at a time. And in this particular fight, it is really important to protect the Servant of Wrath because his Blind Fury passive makes him hit everyone, including you, with 27 damage whenever he takes a certain amount of unblocked damage. Another awesome fight with an ally is one of the Act 2 bosses, against Wolf in Her Nightmares with Red Riding Hooded Mercenary as your ally. This wolf has 2 intents, usually very heavy hitting attacks, one targeting you and the other targeting the mercenary. You want to keep Red Riding Hood alive in this fight because the wolf's Bloodstained Claws passive heals him for 100 HP if she dies and then makes him target you with both intents. The mercenary herself is a great ally that will attack the wolf every turn and even gets this buff where she gains 3 strength every time she deals unblocked damage, rewarding you for breaking the wolf's block. If you steal her kill, she'll get pissed the off, and she'll heal to full HP, she'll become your enemy with all the strength that you helped her get, and then you'll have to fight her. You really want her to get the final hit, unless she is already dead. There's even a few events that give you the option to fight a very powerful enemy for an awesome reward. One example is the Red Mist, who will attack you with 2 cards a turn, but once she reaches 165 HP, she'll become immune to damage and then transform and start using much stronger attacks. Killing her will reward you with a new relic, Strongest, that can give you 1 strength per turn every time you deal 15 damage. Let's cycle back to the Library of Ruina class mod and take a look at their cards, which is probably the most important part about playing a class mod in general. The starting deck is very basic. You have 3 light attacks, aka strikes, 4 light defenses, aka blocks, then you have 2 more attacks. Charge and Cover deals damage and blocks for 2 energy, and Focus Strikes will attack for 8 3 times that costs 3 energy. And then finally in the starting deck is Dodge, which is a skill that you can't actually play, but if it's in your hand, you'll evade any damage that you would take below 4 and then discard itself. Dodge is mediocre at best, but there are a few other evade cards with a similar mechanic, like You're Too Slow, that will evade any damage below 9 and apply 2 vulnerable back. You may have noticed the Pierce and the Slash tags on the starter cards. Those are damage types. The two other damage types are blunt and ranged. Specific damage types can be buffed through a variety of different means, mostly from the pages that you'll collect from the starting relic, but also through many cards like Great Serpent's Impact that increases blunt damage by 2 this turn, and the Dark Cloud, a power that will make your slash attacks apply bleed. Bleed is one of the many new debuffs with this class that makes enemies lose HP equal to bleed stacks whenever you hit them, and it's reduced by 1/3 each turn. Burn is another new debuff that acts exactly similar to Poison in vanilla. It's applied by cards like Chi Wen that deals a bunch of damage, applies 6 burn to the enemy, 3 burn to you, and if you already have burn, it'll heal you 4 HP and give you 2 protection. Protection is a new buff that just reduces damage taken equal to the stacks. The smoke debuff will increase the damage that you receive per stack, but also increase the damage and block values of cards every 8 stacks. Smoke can be applied to both you and your enemies, with a lot of different cards, like Autonomous Rush, that deals 8 damage twice, applies 2 smoke to you and your enemy. There are a few more new keywords with this class, but these are some of the more important ones that give you an idea of what this class is all about. There's also a lot of key pages that you'll collect that interact directly with these new keywords. For example, Yank's page will increase every bleed stack applied by 1, and also just make your slashers apply bleeds. This meter above your character's head is the emotion meter that tracks every card that you play. There are several cards that interact with this emotion meter, like Emotional Turbulence that deals damage and applies burns 3 times, and an additional time per 9 emotion. As cool as some of those cards are, the coolest part about this mod, in my opinion, is when you reach 20 emotion, you'll be prompted to pick one of 5 ego cards, not to be confused with the ego cards from the Ruina Act mod, completely different thing. But these ones will change the scenery and then add that chosen card to your draw pile. When you mouse over this card, you'll see your character change shape, and then when you play the card, there's usually an awesome animation that comes with it. I really like this because it meshes so well with the Ruina Act mod, because most of these ego cards are pretty much turning your character into the monsters that you've been fighting. So it's just pretty awesome, it just meshes together so well, these two mods. Now let's get back to the Ruina Act mod and take a look at some of the Act 3 fights. Big Bird is another elite fight with allies. This time you'll have 2 Sage of the Forests on your side to protect you from Big Bird's massive attacks. The Big Bird has 3 intents, 1 on you and 2 on your allies, mostly applying the enchanted debuffs to your allies that causes them to take 999 damage from Big Bird's next attack. You can remove that enchanted from your allies by simply just attacking them, even with AoE cards. Their Unruffled passive will only make them take 1 damage from your attacks, so you don't have to worry about accidentally killing them. And Prophet is one of the Act 3 bosses. That's a really unique fight. It starts off against these Apostle minions, no boss yet, but the Prophet is behind you for now on your side, giving you buffs every time you kill an Apostle. You can mouse over her to see what buffs you'll gain. For example, you'll get 2 strength on the 1st, 5th, and 9th kill, draw an extra card on the 3rd, 7th, and 11th, then you'll get other buffs like dexterity and energy for certain amounts of kills. The first few turns are about killing these apostles who will resurrect every single turn to get these buffs, and then prepare for the real fight when the Seraphim of a Long Lost Paradise comes out on turn 5 with 666 health, super powerful attacks, and a passive that reduces all damage taken by 50%, which is reduced by 1% every time she takes a hit. She'll also summon a bunch of minions and then start hitting you with multiple intents. She is just really strong, so hopefully you were able to get a bunch of buffs stacked up from that first phase. The hallway fights of Act 2 and Act 3 are also pretty cool. I didn't go over them because I didn't really want to spoil them, but discovering that stuff is really half the fun. And talking about spoiling and discovering stuff, when it comes to Ruina's Act 4, part of me wants to let you discover it yourself, but the other part of me really wants to talk about it because it's probably my favorite part about this mod. I can tell a lot of effort went into this, and it would be a shame to not showcase it. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of the many different combats that you'll encounter in Act 4. You don't need to collect any of the keys to enter this 4th act. You'll always be given an option at the end of the Act 3 boss fight to go through the long or the short version of the act. So like I said, let me give just a few examples. Philip here has 770 max HP and a passive that reduces damage by 60%, reduced by 10% each turn. You have an ally here, Melkuth, who has her own emotion level that is increased by 2 every time you exhaust a card, and she also has her own means of increasing it with her own attacks. She also gives every one of your cards Manifest, which means that if you don't have the energy to spend, you can choose to exhaust one card per energy to play it. Whenever Melkuth reaches 10 emotion, she'll increase an emotion level, doubling her strength and then getting other benefits, capped at 4 levels. Philip will become stronger and stronger during the fight, eventually getting a third intent and then starting to summon these crying children who take half damage. The Musicians of Bremen have a cool melody mechanic where the melody card will be beside them at all times, telling you what cards to play in what order, changing each turn. Completing the melody will reward you with 1 strength. If you fail to complete the melody, the musicians will gain 2 strength. In this fight, you'll have Netzach as an ally, who will put a prescript card into your hand every turn. These prescript cards are just simple 0 energy attacks or skills that retain, which are super helpful when it comes to completing this melody every turn. Those are 2 examples of the many fights you'll be facing on the way to the final boss of Act 4, Roland and Argalia. Roland is actually on your side. You guys are fighting against Argalia, who has 1,650 health, 3 intents, and a passive where whenever you play a card, her intents get shifted to the right. The first intent will always target you, and the next 2 will always target your ally, so you have to be careful, especially with some attacks like Resonant Scythe, which is one that will deal a ton of damage, but then get tripled if it's on the second intent. A lot of her attacks apply this vibration debuff that will be consumed by future attacks for bonuses like block or strength, and then Roland, your ally, will gain strength at the end of every turn, and then will use a strong attack on the 9th turn. I've never gotten to the 9th turn, so I don't know what that means, but I'm assuming it's something that will be ending the fight. And if you thought that was a lot, there's also a secret 5th act if you choose to confront the Black Silence, so have fun figuring that out. And it looks like that's it for this whole Library of Ruina crossover overhaul with 2 mods video showcase. This video took quite a while to make. There's a lot going on with these mods. It's like, they look so simple on the surface, kind of like how Lobotomy Corporation was, but it just kind of goes deeper and deeper and deeper. Like, I can't believe how many different fights there are in Act 4, which is something that like most players aren't even gonna see, which is pretty sad, which is why I wanted to go over it so much. It's so cool, and all the fights are so well designed. The class itself of Library of Ruina, it's really awesome. You can argue that it's not really that balanced. A lot of the cards are like really powerful, especially when you combine them with certain things. And the relics as well are also super powerful. But who cares about balance at the end of the day, right? As long as we're having fun. Once again, keep in mind that these mods are definitely subject to change. They're actively being worked on. So some things that I talked about might not be the same in the future, but I imagine it's going to have kind of the same idea. So yeah, if you're into Slay the Spire mods at all, or if you're into Library of Ruina, highly suggest giving this a try. Also, if you would like Project Moon's games, you should also check out the Lobotomy mod as well. Very different than these 2 mods, but it is also really cool, kind of in the same world. So yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you have a great day. Before I get off here, I would like to thank my members for supporting the channel and letting me sit here and make content. Mr. Fat Cat, Gunner Granzin, and Man Behind the PC. Thank you so much, guys. Also, thank you to all my non-members as well for even just watching and liking or subscribing. It means a lot to me.